something a little bit different for you. Let's jump in and take a look. What's happening, everyone? Welcome to the Whiskey Shed. My name is John McGrath, an Irishman in his workshop, tasting whiskey and sharing it with you guys. Now, I have something completely different for you today. This is an Irish single malt finished in a seaweed cask. So, completely different flavours and tastes and aromas to this one. So, it's quite interesting, so I'm going to share this with you. This is Currach Single Malt Irish Whiskey, Atlantic Combo Seaweed Cask finish. So as always, let's jump in, talk a little bit about the whiskey, and then we'll nose and taste it. Okay, so as always, we'll do a little bit about the whiskey and the company that produce it. Now, we don't have too much history in this one because it's a relatively new company, and take everything I tell you in these videos with a pinch of salt because my names and dates can, vary from reality a little bit. So I do my best to get the facts right, but they're not always right. But this, like I said, Currach Single Malt Irish Whiskey Atlantic Combo Seaweed Cask finish is produced by Origin Spirits Ireland. Now, Origin Spirits Ireland were set up in February 2013, I believe, and they set about to make a world-class vodka. That's what they were doing. So they made a single malt vodka, produced a single malt gin, and now a single malt whiskey. And this was released onto the market in February 2020. Now they're getting all their distillate from the West Cork distillers. That's the lads down in Skippereen, and they have their own range of whiskies, which I do intend on tasting. As soon as I get my hand on a few bottles, I'll do a review on those. So that's where Origin Spirits Ireland are getting this distillate from. Like I say, it's aged in ex-bourbon barrels and then in virgin oak, American oak, that's charred with kombu Irish Atlantic seaweed. So it's quite interesting indeed. Now, the name Currach, which is on the bottle, that's a traditional Irish boat, and records of these boats date back thousands of years. So 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, there's archaeological evidence of these boats being built, and they're still being built and raced today. And Irish monks were off out around the seas in these things, and Saint Brendan the Voyager, as he was known, was supposedly over and back to America long before Columbus. That was around 4 something AD, so 400 in the year 400 something AD. St. Brendan the Voyager was out there in his currach sailing over and back across the Atlantic, apparently. So like I say, these boats date back thousands upon thousands of years. There's records of these boats being built in a traditional way, and they still race these boats and build these boats in the west of Ireland, and that's where the name comes from. And kombu, wild Atlantic seaweed, there's plenty of that stuff in the west of Ireland too. The barley that's in this all comes from the south of Ireland, so it is a non-GMO barley that comes from Waterford, Wexford and Cork. I'm a Waterford man, so it's probably the best barley in the world, and I'm not biased at all in saying that. So that's a little bit about the bottle, a little bit of history about it, so let's get on and nose and taste the whiskey itself. Okay, let's get some of this in the glass. Do we have a nice cork pop? Not bad. Okay, so let's nose and taste this. Now, it is, like I said, aged in Atlantic Combo Seaweed casks, and it's the only whiskey in the world that's supposedly aged in casks. So they age it first in American ex-bourbon barrels, then they get virgin American oak. They char the inside of those barrels with the seaweed, and then they age the whiskey for a further 3 months in those barrels. It is bottled at 46% ABV, and it's non-chill filtered, so it's always nice to see that on the bottle. So on the nose, it's completely unusual. It's a big hit of iodine is what I get. You get a big smell of the sea. It's quite an interesting one. I haven't decided whether I like this or not yet. I've seen some fantastic reviews of this. Some people were blown away by it. I don't know. It's a kind of an unusual one, but you can definitely get the seaweed. You get a big hit of iodine, and I don't know if any of you guys live near a fishing village. I have one not too far from me, Dunmore East, and out there on a summer's day, when you smell the fisherman's nets kind of drying in the sunshine, it's that smell of evaporating kind of salty sea smell. It's all in there, and then you get all the influence from the single malt whiskey, and you get the bourbon cask influence. There's vanilla and toffee. There's a lovely honeyed sweetness in there. that just sits underneath that quite unusual kind of briny iodine smell of the sea. It's fascinating to say the least. It's very, very interesting. I've not smelled or nosed a whiskey like this before. And like I say, I can't decide whether I like this or not. I'm sure this is going to be one of those whiskeys where people are going to go, that's absolutely fantastic, or I really don't like it. It's going to be somewhere in between. But yeah, that's the nose, quite unusual. So on the palate. Now on the palate, I find the palate is a lot nicer than the nose. So the flavours, that iodine flavour is kind of relaxed a little. The seaweed flavours are relaxed a little. It all kind of integrates. It's very unusual. You get the lovely kind of vanilla and toffee that you'd expect from the bourbon casks. The single malt that's in this, the actual distillate itself is actually really, really nice. It has a really silky, smooth texture to it. There's no real burn from the ethanol. But that kind of seaweedy, almost coffee, iodine, brininess is all in there. It sits well in the mix, I have to say. As I'm tasting this more and more, it's growing on me. But when you first taste it, it's like, man, that's completely unusual. So yeah, on the palate, up front, the iodine, the seaweed, then the sweetness comes through from the bourbon cask influence, and it's a lovely, lovely distillate that's in this. So I'm interested in trying more from the West Cork distillers, because I have to say what's in the glass is very nice, and what sits on top of it is very unusual. So what we'll do is we'll let this sit on its side for about 10 minutes. We'll let it open up and see what we can pull out of this one. It's quite an unusual whiskey indeed. Okay, so now that we've done the usual thing and let it sit for about 10 minutes, let it open up, we'll see what else we can get from it. So on the nose. It's just that smell of the sea is just so dominant. When you nose this, you'll just feel like you're standing right on the coast. It's salty sea air with a kind of briny iodine that you smell when there's loads of seaweed around. It's just that smell, it's so dominant. Now, I let my wife have a nose of this, and she couldn't get it at all. She just smelled the sweetness and the toffee from the bourbon influence. But for me, I suppose when you're used to nosing and tasting whiskey, you're really going to smell what's different about this whiskey. And it's so to the forefront and dominant. You put your nose in it, and it is just like standing at the coast. Absolutely fascinating. I suppose if you love that salty sea air smell, you're probably going to love this whiskey. And like I say, it sits on top of a lovely sweetness, so you get the vanilla and toffee in the background. I'm not picking out too much else, but you get that bourbon barrel influence, maybe a little hint of barley from the single malt, but that iodine seaweed smell is just so dominant, and it is, like I say, just like standing on the coast. So on the palate. It gets better. It gets better each time on the palate. Each time I taste it, it's getting nicer on the palate, I have to say. The kind of seaweed influence is more and more integrated. It's a little bit more subdued. You get a big hit of sweetness that time up front, so I'm getting that lovely toffee and vanilla and honeyness from the bourbon, and then it's like coffee now I'm getting. You're getting the iodine has kind of transformed into a kind of a coffee now on the mid palate, or maybe some dark chocolates. So definitely it's one that you should let open up and sit for a while. The first taste out of this bottle probably will shock you, but as you let it sit and open up, I have to say the flavours really do begin to integrate, and it becomes very, very nice. So it's really growing on me now. So nice, lovely sweetness up front, then a kind of a coffee and dark chocolate in the middle with that little seaweed hint and some iodine, a little bit of spice to finish. Not much heat. It's very, very silky, smooth distillate that's in this. The whiskey itself is actually lovely, but it's the flavours that are absolutely fascinating. And yeah, so that's it on the palate. Very, very nice that time, I have to say. It's definitely growing on me. So yeah, do I recommend it? Probably a good one. Okay guys, there we go. That has been my review of Currach Single Malt Irish Whiskey from Origin Spirits Ireland, and it is completely unique and completely fascinating. It's the only whiskey in the world, as far as I know, that's been aged with seaweed, and I can still taste the sea. It lingers and lingers and lingers. I still have that kind of sea saltiness vibe going on my tongue now at the minute. But I have to say, it's growing on me. Is it going to be one for everybody? I'm not sure. Some of the reviews of this have been absolutely fantastic. I definitely recommend you get yourself a bottle of this if you can, just to try something completely different. It's fascinating, it's interesting. Will you like it? I don't know. I can't tell you that. It's definitely growing on me. And I can tell you the whiskey in the bottle is very, very good. It's just whether you're going to like that seaweed cask influence, but it's definitely unique. It retails for €55 here in Ireland. I don't think this is available in America, but you can buy it from the Celtic Whiskey shop in Dublin, and they do ship to the United States. So if you do, and if you're in America and you want to really taste this and you want to pay the shipping costs, then you will get a bottle of this over to you if you really want. The Celtic Whiskey shop will get it over to you. But yeah, very, very interesting, guys. A very fascinating one. So yeah, there we go. Hopefully you've enjoyed that one, guys. It's completely unique. It's growing on me, like I said, and yeah, it's always nice to try something that's completely different, and that is completely different. So, Sláinte Makara, I shall see you in the next one. Take it easy. It's toffee and sea. The toffee and the sea.